Hey everyone, if you enjoy my park ranger horror stories, I've started uploading them on Spotify too. My YouTube channel got demonetized, so I'm putting a lot more focus into Spotify now. You'll find daily scary stories there with longer, darker, and more immersive horror content. If you want to support the channel, please go follow the Spotify page and leave a 5-star rating. It genuinely helps me keep making these stories. The Spotify link is in the description and pinned comment. Turn off the lights. Put on your headphones and I'll see you there. My name is Douglas Carmichael, and I've spent 21 years watching people die on Denali. Not watching, exactly. That's not fair. I've spent 21 years trying to stop it. Pulling frozen climbers off exposed ridges. Carrying bodies down in the dark. Filing reports that said things like, weather-related incident, or equipment failure. When the truth was simpler and harder, the mountain won. People call me Doug. I'm 54 years old. I grew up in Fairbanks, son of an Athabascan mother and a Scottish-Irish father, who both loved wild places more than comfortable ones. My grandfather was a ranger. My father was a ranger. When I was 8, I told my dad I wanted to be a ranger too, and he just nodded like he'd always known. Like the mountain had already decided for me. I've held a Class 4 and 5 climbing certification for 15 years. I speak English and my mother's language, Athabascan. I am not, by any measure, a man who believes in monsters. Supernatural creatures don't exist above 20,000 feet. I used to tell new rangers when they'd hear the old stories around the fire. The mountain itself is lethal enough without imaginary monsters. I believe that completely. Right up until October 1975. That autumn started like most others. The days were getting short. Only 8 hours of light by mid-October. And the temperature was dropping fast. We'd get days that started at 15 degrees Fahrenheit and ended at 40 below when the wind came. During a storm, with wind chill, it could feel like 70 below zero. At those temperatures, exposed skin dies in minutes. Decisions kill you faster than the cold does. My patrol area covered the Northeast Ridge Approach and the Wonder Lake region. Beautiful country. Brutal country. 12 miles of terrain, where a single wrong step could mean a 2,000-foot fall into a crevasse that nobody would ever find you in. I had a son back home, Thomas. He'd just turned 18 that September and moved to Anchorage to start his life. His mother had died when he was born, complications during delivery, and I'd raised him alone between park seasons, with help from my mother's family. Every time I went up that mountain, I thought about Thomas, about making sure I came back down. That's the thing about Denali. It makes you careful. It punishes you if you stop being careful. 3 men stopped being careful in October 1975. Or maybe the mountain stopped letting them be careful. I still don't know which one is true. Dr. Viktor Volkov was 57, a Soviet geologist, which created some quiet tension at the park office, given the times. Dr. James Wheeler was 52, an American geologist, friendly and loud, and always laughing at his own jokes. Their climbing guide was Henrik Soren, 45, Norwegian, one of the best in the world. If anyone could keep 2 scientists alive on that mountain, it was Henrik. They established camp at 17,500 feet on October 9th. Weather looked manageable. Their plan was an acclimatization climb. Go up, come back down, let their bodies adjust to the altitude. Standard stuff. Henrik had done it 100 times. Radio contact stopped at 2 p.m. on October 10th. We waited 24 hours, the way protocol requires. Then I put together a 4-man search team and we went up. The first thing wrong was the ropes. Their base camp was untouched. Sleeping bags, food, cooking equipment, all of it sitting exactly where it should be, like the men had just stepped out for a walk and planned to be back for dinner. But their climbing ropes, the ones they would have used on the upper ridge, were cut clean. Not frayed, not snapped from a fall. Cut, like someone had taken a very sharp knife and sliced straight through them, neat as cutting ribbon. I stood there holding one of those rope ends and turned it over in my hands for a long time. Nobody said anything. My lead searcher, Marcus Webb, a 38-year-old ranger who'd been with me 6 years, just looked at it and then looked at me. We both knew what ropes looked like when they failed from stress or weather. We'd seen it before. This wasn't that. Rockfall could have... Marcus started. No, I said. I didn't explain further. There was nothing to explain. We both knew. We found Henrik Soren at 18,200 feet. He was standing up. That's the part that stays with me. Even now, decades later. He was standing with his back against the rock face, perfectly still, arms at his sides. I thought for 1 second, one wild, stupid second, that he was alive and just very cold. Then I got closer. He'd been frozen solid, completely encased in a thin layer of clear ice that had formed around him like a shell. His eyes were open. His expression wasn't fear. It was something I'd never seen on a human face before. Confusion, maybe. Like he'd seen something and couldn't understand what it was. His head was missing. The spinal column had been cut clean, just like the ropes. No blood. The ice around the wound was smooth, cauterized somehow. Like a seal had been pressed over the cut. 2 of my searchers turned away and were sick. The third, a young guy named Pete, just sat down in the snow and stared at nothing. I made myself look carefully, professionally, the way my training told me to. I noted everything. I kept my breathing slow. The ice around Henrik's feet formed strange patterns. I noticed it because it didn't look like natural ice formation. It looked almost like writing. Long crystalline lines connecting in shapes that repeated, like a symbol being drawn over and over. I told myself it was just frost patterns. Ice does strange things at altitude. There's a rational explanation for ice patterns. I also noted that the temperature right around Henrik's body was 20 degrees colder than the air 5 feet away. Not a little colder. 20 degrees. I checked the thermometer 3 times. Then Marcus Webb stopped walking. We were descending back toward lower camp, and Marcus just stopped. Stood still in the middle of the snow with his face turned upward, looking at the ridge above us. I called his name. He didn't answer. Pete grabbed his arm. Marcus didn't move, didn't look at us, didn't blink. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. Marcus. I got in front of him. His eyes were open, but not focused on my face. They were focused on something above and behind me. Marcus, what do you see? He said, very quietly, my mother. She's calling me to come up. Marcus's mother had been dead for 12 years. I got him moving. Got everyone moving down the mountain, fast. Marcus walked on his own, but didn't speak again for 2 hours. When we made base camp and got him into the warm tent with hot tea, he just sat with his hands wrapped around the mug, shaking. Pete and the other searcher, a man named Al, told me separately that they'd both seen someone on the ridge too. Pete said it was his brother, who died in Vietnam. Al said it was his daughter, who was very much alive and living in Denver, which somehow made it worse. I hadn't seen anyone. I don't know why. Marcus Webb died that night. He was sitting up in his sleeping bag, appeared to be resting, and his heart simply stopped. He was 38 years old, no history of heart problems, and the doctor who later examined his records found nothing that could explain it. His face, when we found him in the morning, looked the same way Henrik's had. Not afraid, confused, like he'd seen something his brain couldn't hold. I wrote the report. I was very careful with my words. We found Dr. Volkov 4 days later. He was 2,000 feet below his last known radio position, which made no sense by itself. But the way we found him made less sense than that. He was curled up in a tight ball on a flat section of ice, like a child sleeping. His expression was peaceful. If you didn't look closely, you might think he'd just sat down and fallen asleep. If you looked closely, you could see that every bone in his body had been broken. Not from a fall. A fall creates specific fracture patterns, and I've seen enough of them to know. These breaks were uniform, consistent, like something had applied slow, even pressure to his entire body from the outside. Like something had squeezed him, gently, until everything inside gave way. The park's chief medical officer used the phrase massive compressive trauma in his report. He couldn't explain the mechanism. He used the word unusual 7 times in 4 pages. Dr. Wheeler was never found, but we found his climbing journal at 16,000 feet, pages flapping in the wind, held down by his ice axe. The first entries were neat and professional. Observations about rock formations, notes on weather patterns, sketches of geological features. By day 3, the handwriting got harder to read. Shakir. The note stopped being about geology. Something in the ice, moving, watching us. Volkov says I'm imagining it. Henrik says nothing. Henrik doesn't look at us anymore. The mountain is not a mountain. I think I've been wrong about what mountains are. The last entry was almost unreadable, letters falling over each other. It's not on the mountain. Mountain is it. Walls breathing, ice alive, Volkov gone. It took his... That was all. I drove to see Samuel Tetlichi on a Tuesday afternoon. He was 89 years old, one of the last elders who still knew the old stories in their original form. He lived in a small house outside the park boundary with his granddaughter, who made us both tea and then very quietly left the room when she heard what I was asking about. Samuel listened to everything I told him without interrupting. Then he was quiet for a long time. My grandfather told me about this, he said finally. And his grandfather told him, there is something that lives in the mountain's heart. Not an animal. Not a spirit, exactly. Something older. He looked at his tea. Each time a person dies on that mountain, it wakes up a little more. It learns from them. Takes their memories, their knowledge, their fears. The deaths are not accidents, Ranger Carmichael. They are lessons. Lessons for what? I asked. It wants to understand what we are, Samuel said. It has been learning for a very long time. Your scientists. He paused. They would have had very useful knowledge. I thought about Wheeler's journal. Mountain Azit, is it dangerous? I asked, which was a stupid question given 3 dead men. But I meant something more specific. Is it something a person can survive meeting? Samuel looked at me for a long time. My grandfather's grandfather met it, he said. He came back down. He never spoke about what happened. He lived to be very old and never climbed again, and never explained why. Samuel set down his tea. But that was a long time ago, before all the climbers came, before all the deaths. It has learned much more since then. That night, I found a file in the park's archives from the 1932 expedition, the one where all the climbers died. The report was written by a ranger who'd found the camp. He'd included a note, marked unofficial, paper yellowed and fragile. Survivor testimony from base camp cook, not included in official record. The cook reported that the last 2 climbers, before they ascended Final Ridge, described seeing a figure above them on the ice. Human in shape, but not in size. Much too large. Moving straight up the cliff face like the rock was flat ground. The cook said the climbers described its face clearly. It kept changing. One moment it looked like a man from their party who had already died. The next moment it looked like someone else. He said they described it as if it was trying out different faces, like trying on hats. I read that 3 times. Then I put on my gear and went up alone. I know it was not a smart decision. I've thought about that many times since. But I need you to understand that by that point, I'd had 3 men die on my mountain. A government team confiscate all my physical evidence and order me to close the investigation, and a conversation with an elder that confirmed my worst suspicions. Smart decisions were not really available to me anymore, only necessary ones. I went up to 19,800 feet. Above that, in October, in those conditions, even I wouldn't survive long. I set my gear, checked my ice axe, made sure my flares were in my jacket pocket, and waited. I didn't wait long. It came out of the mountain the way a storm comes, gradually and then all at once. First the temperature dropped, fast and sharp. Then the wind stopped, which at 19,800 feet is so unusual it made my stomach drop. Then the air itself seemed to thicken, like something was pressing on it from above. It was 12 feet tall, maybe more. It was made of ice and snow and something else. There was light in it, pale green and white, aurora light, moving and shifting the way aurora does in the sky. Its shape was human, the way a reflection in water is human, recognizable but not right, edges uncertain, constantly shifting. It had no fixed features, except when it wanted to. It chose features the way you'd choose a word. It showed me Henrik's face first. Henrik Soren's face on that massive shifting body, looking down at me. Then Volkov's face. Then Wheeler's. And I didn't know what Wheeler looked like, but I knew that face was his because the thing wearing it knew I would know. It showed me my wife's face last. She's been gone for 18 years. I still know every detail of her face. Seeing it on that thing, on something that had learned her face from the memory of a dead man, I can't describe what that did to me. I want to be honest with you, the way I've tried to be honest about all of this. I almost walked toward it. I took one step before I caught myself. Then it spoke to me, and the speaking wasn't sound. It was inside my head, clear and quiet and very calm. Ranger Carmichael, I have learned your language from the dead. I have studied your fears through their final moments. You are afraid of leaving your son alone. Thomas. He is in Anchorage right now. He is at his apartment on the 3rd floor. He came home from work 20 minutes ago. I can't tell you what it felt like to hear my son's name in that voice. I can't put words to it. I have been in this mountain for a very long time, it continued. Longer than your kind has had language. I have learned from everything that has died here. The animals, first. Then your people, when they began to come. Each death teaches me. The scientists were very useful. They knew things that will help me. Help you do what? My voice came out steady, which surprised me. Leave. Simple as that. I have been learning what I need to understand in order to walk among you. I am almost ready. Your scientists accelerated the process considerably. The thing is, it wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was curious and patient and completely, utterly without mercy, in the way that weather is without mercy. Not because it wants to harm you, but because your survival simply isn't part of what it's thinking about. I pulled the first flare and lit it. The reaction was immediate. The entity pulled back, not in pain, but in sharp surprise, like a person who's touched a hot stove. The light from the flare was intense and focused and hot, and where it hit the aurora light in the creature's body, the light went dark. It stepped back. Its shape destabilized. Interesting, it said in my head. I swung my ice axe into the lower section of its body and felt the impact. Not like hitting something solid, but like hitting water. A sharp resistance, and then my axe went through, and where the metal disrupted the crystalline structure, I could see it fracturing, pieces of the formed ice scattering. The entity made a sound then, not in my head but out loud. A high harmonic tone that hit my brain like a spike and sent me to my knees. I set off the climbing charges I'd brought, 2 of them, into the ice shelf above us. I want to be honest, I didn't know if this would work. I was running on instinct and terror. The avalanche came down fast and heavy and hit the entity broadside, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw it fully disrupted, scattered, the aurora light diffusing into the general air, gone. Then I ran. I descended that mountain faster than I have ever descended anything before or since. I don't remember most of it. I remember falling twice. I remember my left hand going completely numb around the 16,000-foot mark. I remember seeing the lights of base camp below and thinking very clearly, you're going to make it. Keep moving. Thomas needs you to make it. I made it. They airlifted me out the next morning. 3 fingers on my left hand were lost to frostbite. I spent 2 months in a hospital in Anchorage, which at least meant I got to see Thomas every few days, which was the only good part of any of it. The official report on the 3 deaths said, climbing accident, weather deterioration, human error. The government team that confiscated my evidence never contacted me again. The military maintained a presence at base camp for 18 months, under the cover story of a geological survey. I never found out what they learned, or if they learned anything. I retired when I got out of the hospital. I'd given 21 years to that park, and I was done. I moved to a cabin 20 miles outside the park boundary and started writing everything down. Not just what happened in October 1975, but every strange report I could find, every encounter logged by climbers and rangers across Alaska, going back as far as records existed. I talked to elders. I talked to climbers who'd survived things they couldn't explain. I wrote it all down. Denali's climbing death rate has increased in the decades since. I've followed the reports. Some of them are ordinary. Weather, altitude, equipment. But some of them describe things that don't fit the ordinary explanations. And the descriptions of what climbers see, when they survive to describe it, have changed. Gotten more specific. More convincing. Climbers report seeing family members on the ridge. Not vague shapes, but perfect replicas. Saying the right names. Using personal details. Knowing things no stranger could know. It's been learning. All this time, I found the last piece 3 years before I wrote this down for good. I was in Anchorage visiting Thomas. He has a family now, 2 kids, a good life, and I was walking to meet him for lunch. I was on a street downtown, midday, people everywhere, and I saw a man on the other side of the street. He was tall, not 12 feet tall, human height, walking slowly, hands in his pockets, wearing ordinary clothes. He looked like a man you'd walk past without a second thought. But I stopped walking, because for just a second, less than a second, his face changed. Just a flicker, like a mask settling. And the face I saw beneath it, just for that instant, was every face at once. Henrik and Volkov and Wheeler and my wife and Marcus Webb and everyone who had ever died on that mountain, cycling through in less than a heartbeat. He turned and looked at me across the street. He smiled, with a human face, perfect and calm. Then he walked around a corner and was gone. My granddaughter asked me once why I spent so many years writing about scary things. I told her I wasn't trying to scare anyone. I was trying to warn them. The mountain didn't keep it. We climbed too high and died too many times and taught it everything it needed to know. And then we kept going back. Every year, more of us, carrying more knowledge. And every death was another lesson. It's not up there anymore. We brought it down. My name is Vernon Ashford, but everyone calls me Vern. I'm 52 years old, and I've worked as a ranger in Alaska for 19 years. Before that, I grew up in Ketchikan and never left. This forest is in my blood. My great-grandmother was Tlingit, and she used to say the land remembers the people who respect it. I work in the Wildlife Management Division for Tongass National Forest. That means I know bears better than I know people. I can track them, predict them, understand how they think. Bears are simple. They're hungry, or they're not. Scared, or they're not. People always want to believe animals are smart like us, that they have feelings and plans. I learned a long time ago that's just people making excuses. Animals do what their bodies tell them to do, nothing more. My wife died 12 years ago, cancer. We had 2 kids, but they don't call much anymore. They said I cared more about the forest than I cared about them. Maybe they were right. I don't like to think about it. I live alone in a ranger station 30 miles from the nearest town. You can only reach it by boat or float plane. The nearest hospital is 4 hours away by helicopter, and that's only if the weather cooperates. Most days, it doesn't. July 1981. That's when everything changed. It was the peak of salmon season. The rivers were full of fish, and that meant the bears were everywhere. The whole forest was awake and hungry. The daylight lasted 16 hours or more. Barely any darkness at night, just a sort of gray twilight that made it hard to sleep. The weather was what it always is in southeast Alaska. Misty, wet, cold. 50 to 65 degrees, with rain coming in thick walls that appeared out of nowhere. I had driven my patrol boat down the Carter River that morning, checking on the fishing camps. The river was gray and loud with meltwater from the glaciers. The forest on both sides was dark green, and so thick you couldn't see 20 feet back from the shore. Mist hung over everything like a blanket. I noticed something was wrong before I saw anything specific. The birds had stopped singing. That might sound small, but it's not. In summer, the forest never goes quiet. There's always noise. That day, there was nothing. Just the sound of the river and the engine of my boat. I told myself it was normal. Sometimes things change. The bears come in thick during salmon season, and they can scare off the smaller animals. That's what I told myself anyway. When I got back to the station that evening and turned on my radio, everything changed. The first report came in at 6:47 p.m. A fishing crew had missed their check-in call. That was unusual but not unheard of. Radio equipment failed sometimes. The Coast Guard would probably find them stranded on a beach with a dead battery. By midnight, 2 more crews had missed their calls. 4 crews by morning. The search started at dawn. I was part of the first group that found David Olson. We discovered him in a tidal pool near the mouth of the Carter River. His boat tied up 100 yards away with the engine still running. His radio was intact and working. He just never used it. His body was ruined. I've seen a lot of death in the forest. Bear kills, accidents, hunters who made bad decisions. This was different. David had been drained. His skin looked like paper. His eyes had sunk back into his skull. When we pulled him out of the water, he was light, like lifting an empty bag. There was almost nothing left inside him. What animal does this? One of the younger rangers, a kid named Marcus, was sitting on a rock with his head in his hands. I don't know, I said. And I meant it. The autopsy happened 3 days later in Ketchikan. The medical examiner called me personally. He was careful with his words, like he was worried I'd think he was crazy. There's no obvious wound, he told me. No puncture marks, no slashes, nothing. But his blood vessels are completely empty. I've never seen anything like it. His hemoglobin is altered somehow. There's protein in his blood that shouldn't be there. Could a bear do it? I asked. Not like this, he said. A bear would tear him apart. This is clean, precise. I was still thinking it had to be an animal. I was still trying to make it fit into the world I understood. 2 days after David, we found James Morrison. He was in a tree 30 feet up, his body wedged between the trunk and a branch. No one could figure out how he got there. No climbing equipment, no injuries that suggested he fell. He was positioned carefully, like someone had placed him there on purpose. His body was the same as David's, empty, drained, weighing almost nothing. Margaret Tierney was discovered a day later, in a clearing near her photography camp. She was different. Her body showed signs of being eaten, but the wounds were arranged in a pattern. Her organs were removed and laid out around her in a circle, like some kind of ritual. The ranger who found her quit 2 weeks later. By the end of the week, we'd found all 5 missing fishermen. Every body told the same story, completely drained of blood, no defensive wounds, no signs of struggle. The forest was wrong now. The silence had gotten worse. The few bears we saw looked frightened. They moved fast through the areas where the bodies had been found, like they were running from something. I'd never seen bears act scared before. Bears don't get scared. They're the predators. The salmon stopped running, just like someone had turned off a switch. The rivers were empty. That shouldn't have been possible. The conditions were perfect for salmon, but they were gone. That's when I knew this wasn't just an animal. I started mapping where the bodies were found. I plotted them on a chart, marking the dates and times. A pattern emerged. The kills were in a grid. A spiral, actually, moving outward from a center point. The creature was moving through the forest systematically, like it was working through an area methodically, like it was harvesting. I showed the chart to my supervisor, Captain Reynolds. He looked at it for a long time. "Don't mention this to anyone," he said. "Especially not to the media. This could help us track it," I said. "Just don't," he said. 3 days later, federal agents showed up. They had military patches and government IDs, and they took over the investigation without explaining anything to us. They took tissue samples from the bodies. They marked off areas of the forest as off-limits. They asked questions, but didn't answer any. I did some research on my own. I went through old newspaper archives in the Ketchikan Library. In 1934, 5 fishermen had vanished in the exact same area. Their bodies were found exactly the same way, drained of blood. The incident was blamed on a rogue bear and supposedly resolved. But I found a mention in a 1952 article about fishing communities, reporting something massive, taking entire salmon catches and leaving the animals to rot, uneaten. That's not animal behavior. I went to see Agnes Vanderbilt, an elderly Tlingit woman who lived on the edge of town. My grandmother had known her. She was 94 years old and lived alone in a house that smelled like cedar smoke. "I need to ask you about something," I said. "Something from the old stories." She looked at me for a long moment. "The Tongass hunger," she said. "Not a question. Tell me." "It's been here longer than the trees," she said. "Longer than the Tlingit people. It sleeps for seasons, sometimes years. Then it wakes up hungry. It doesn't hunt like bears hunt. It feeds on something deeper, on life itself, on blood the way we need water." "How do you stop it?" I asked. "You don't stop it," she said. "You endure it. You survive until it sleeps again. My people learned that a long time ago. Your people tried to kill it. That didn't work. You just made it angry. What is it? What kind of animal?" "Not animal," she said. "It's something else. Something that was here before animals had names." I didn't believe her. Not really. I was still a ranger. I understood animals. But something in me knew she was telling the truth. The evidence kept coming. We found the body of a 300-pound grizzly, crushed like it was made of paper. Its ribs were shattered. Its spine was broken. The force required to do that would be enormous, something much bigger and stronger than any normal bear. I got a call from the university about the tissue sample they'd sent. A man named Dr. Patterson, a biologist. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "From one of the victims," I said. "What is it?" "I'm not supposed to talk about this," he said. "But if I were you, I'd get out of that forest. There are agencies that know about this. They've known for a long time. They're not going to protect you." "What is it?" I asked again. "It's nothing that should exist," he said. Then he hung up. I saw it on the 23rd of July. I was tracking alone near the Carta River, following what I thought was a bear trail. The forest was even quieter than before. I was the only thing moving through it. The mist was thick enough that I could barely see 10 feet ahead. Then the mist parted. It was standing on the riverbank, and it was nothing like anything I'd ever seen. It looked like a bear, but wrong. It was 12 feet tall, maybe more. Its shoulders were too broad. Its legs were angled in a way that no animal's legs should bend. Its fur was matted and dark, slick like it was wet or covered in something. When it turned to look at me, I saw intelligence in its eyes. Real intelligence. The creature spoke to me, but not with words. It was in my head, direct and clear, like a thought that wasn't my own. "You understand hunger. You understand territory. You understand death. Become like me. Join the feeding." I couldn't move. My hands had gone numb. My heart felt like it was trying to break out of my chest. "I know your daughter," the thing said. "Tall, lives in Seattle, works at a hospital. I can walk to her anytime. I can feed on her while you're sleeping, unless you let me continue." It showed me images, my daughter's apartment, the route from her bedroom to the kitchen. Details only someone watching her would know. The creature had been learning. It had been studying my family. That's when something in me broke and came back together different. I raised my rifle and fired. The bullet hit the creature's shoulder, and it screamed. A sound like the forest itself was being torn in half. But the creature didn't run. It charged. I kept firing. I was thinking of my daughter, of the fisherman, of Margaret Tierney arranged in a circle in a clearing. The creature was fast, but it moved like something heavy through water. I could see it struggling against something invisible, like it was fighting against the air itself. I realized it was using telepathy like a weapon, trying to freeze me the way it had frozen the other victims. I fired in rapid bursts, and each shot seemed to disrupt whatever it was doing. The creature's focus broke for moments at a time, and it would stumble. We ended up in the river. The meltwater was rushing hard, the current powerful enough to knock a person over. The creature had size and strength, but the water fought it the way the air did. I scrambled backward, deeper into the river. I had explosives in my pack, emergency flares and demolition charges for clearing rock slides. I wired them together as fast as I could, while the creature dragged itself through the water toward me, moving like it was pushing through thick mud. I set the timer and threw them upstream to the cliff face. The explosion came 3 seconds later. The rock slide came down like an avalanche. The creature tried to teleport or push it back, or whatever it was it did, but it was off balance in the water, and the rocks came too fast. I watched it get swept downstream, rolling in the current, disappearing around the bend. I didn't wait to see if it came back. I found high ground and signaled for the helicopter. They got me out in 40 minutes. I spent 6 weeks in the hospital, claw wounds across my ribs down to the bone. My shoulder was torn apart. The doctors had to rebuild it with metal and screws. I needed 3 units of blood transfused. I had nightmares that didn't stop for months. The official report said a rogue grizzly bear had attacked fishermen and rangers. The army organized a massive hunt, but they never found the creature. The government declared the situation resolved and opened the forest back to fishing. I was discharged from the Rangers service 6 months later. Mental disability, they called it. Questionable judgment under stress. They reduced my pension. No one believed me. The doctors said the trauma of what I'd witnessed had broken something in my mind. They suggested the creature was some kind of stress hallucination. Even Reynolds, my supervisor, wouldn't meet my eyes when we talked. But the deaths didn't stop. Every few months, someone would disappear or be found drained of blood. A couple of hikers here. A remote research team there, always in Southeast Alaska, always blamed on animals or accidents. I called my daughter for the first time in 3 years. I told her what I'd seen. I told her to never come to Alaska, to install good locks on her apartment, to be careful. She thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. I live in a small house in Ketchikan now. I have guns and motion sensors. I don't sleep much. Sometimes I sit on my porch at night and watch the trees, waiting to see if something tall will come walking out of the darkness. The forest is still hunting. Agnes Vanderbilt called me 6 months ago. She was 95 then. She said the entity was learning. It was getting smarter. It was learning to hide better, to move through towns without being noticed. She said the day might come when it didn't need to hide at all, when it was intelligent enough to walk into Anchorage or Seattle in the middle of the day, and no one would know what they were looking at. I keep my notes in a locked box under my bed. Everything I documented, all the evidence. Sometimes I think about sending them to someone, but I know what would happen. They'd disappear like the other evidence did, or they'd find me crazy like everyone else did. The only thing I know for certain is this: that thing is still out there. It's patient. It sleeps for seasons, wakes up hungry, and feeds, but it's learning. And eventually, it's going to learn how to walk into a city. When it does, no one will understand what's happening until it's too late. The Tongass hunger is patient. It can wait. But I can't stop watching the trees. My name is Theodore Prescott. People call me Ted. I'm 50 years old, and I've spent the last 16 years as the Chief Ranger of Gates of the Arctic National Park in Alaska. That's a fancy title that basically means I'm responsible for keeping people safe in a place that doesn't want to be safe. Let me explain what this park really is. It's 13,000 square miles of wilderness. No roads. No towns inside the boundaries. The nearest town is 90 miles away through snow and ice. When something goes wrong out here, you can't just call for help. You have to be the help. You have to figure it out yourself, or people die. I grew up in Connecticut, Yale education. I was military once, Army Corps of Engineers. I thought I understood wilderness and danger. That was before I really understood wilderness, and before I understood what danger actually means. The park sits near the Arctic Circle. In March, when this story starts, the days are barely 6 hours long. The temperature hovers between -30 and -50 degrees. The wind hits you like a punch. The snow doesn't fall so much as get thrown at you by the air itself. And the darkness. When the sun goes down, it doesn't just get dark. It gets absolute. I divorced years ago. 2 grown kids back in the lower 48 states. They barely know their father anymore. My life up here has a cost, and they paid it too. But that's the deal I made. I wanted to dedicate myself to something real, something that mattered. Conservation, preservation, keeping wild places actually wild. Most of the time, that meant keeping people out of trouble with their own ignorance. I've seen things in the Arctic that most people will never see. I've climbed mountains that don't have names. I've survived nights that should have killed me. I'm certified in emergency medicine. I know how to navigate by stars and mountains and the feel of wind on your skin. I've trained to handle bear attacks, avalanches, frostbite, hypothermia, altitude sickness. I know 1,000 ways the wilderness can kill you, and I know how to fight against most of them. But here's what I believed then. In this landscape, nature is supernatural enough. Cold kills, starvation kills, exhaustion kills. We don't need to invent monsters when reality is already terrifying. I was wrong about that. March 15th, 1978. 3 researchers went into the Aragetch Peaks to do a geological survey. Dr. Harold Vance, 56 years old, experienced geophysicist. Dr. Patricia Nolan, 49, botanist, smart as they come. And Eric Bradford, a graduate student, 23 years old, fresh and eager to prove himself. They had equipment that was cutting edge for 1978, a satellite radio. They established a daily check-in protocol. We knew exactly when they should report back to base camp. When they missed their first check-in, I noted it but didn't panic. Weather was rough. Radio could go down. By the third missed check-in, I assembled a rescue team. The flight to their base camp took 18 hours because weather kept forcing us to stop. When we finally landed on a frozen lake, 6 miles from their camp, we suited up and started hiking through snow that came up to our thighs. I'll never forget the moment we saw their tents. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. The tents were standing like nothing had happened. Equipment was organized. Food supplies were untouched. Sleeping bags weren't even disturbed. They had just walked away. 3 people, middle of nowhere. Extreme cold, dangerous terrain. They had just abandoned everything and walked out into the Arctic. Except they hadn't made it back to civilization. My radio operator started the tracking procedure. That's when we found the footprints. The tracks started at the edge of the camp. 3 sets of human footprints. But as we followed them, something changed. The prints became larger, deeper, like the weight pressing down increased as they walked. And then the prints just stopped. Like they ended mid-step. Like the people just vanished into the air. We kept searching. We had to find them. Rangers don't leave people in the mountains. We found Patricia Nolan, 8 miles from camp, at the base of a cliff that couldn't have been more than 200 feet high. But her body, I've never described this to anyone, not really. Her spine was broken in 3 places. Her ribs were crushed. Her internal organs were damaged, like something massive had compressed them. All of this from a 200-foot fall? That doesn't work. That's not how physics works. 2 hours later, we found Harold Vance in a frozen riverbed. Same injuries. Frostbite, yes, but also massive trauma. Like something had grabbed him and squeezed. Eric Bradford we never found. But his last position, from equipment we recovered, was 15 miles from camp. His footprints showed he was being chased by something much, much larger than a man. My first thought was animal attack. Grizzly bear, maybe. But that didn't make sense. Bears were hibernating. And bears don't break spines like this. No animal does this. My second thought was murder. But there was no blood. No weapon marks. No signs of struggle except the broken bodies themselves. We set up a search perimeter to look for Eric. I organized the teams, checked the equipment, and started the procedures I'd trained for 1,000 times. Find the missing person. Bring them home. That's when things started getting wrong. The first thing I noticed was the cold. I'm used to cold. I know cold. I can read it like other people read books. But there was a zone around the place where Patricia was found that just felt different. Colder than it should be. I checked the thermometer. 40 degrees colder than the rest of the area. 40 degrees. That's not a natural temperature variation. The compass started acting strange. My backup compass too. They'd spin wildly and then settle on a direction that didn't match the maps. One ranger got lost trying to follow his compass. He walked in what he thought was a straight line for 2 hours and ended up 50 feet from where he started. We heard a sound, this low humming that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It made your teeth hurt, made your skull vibrate. 3 of the rangers reported headaches within 20 minutes of hearing it. And then we found the tracks. Not human tracks. Not animal tracks. Something else. Massive footprints, 4-toed, sinking deep into the frozen ground. And they were fresh. Very fresh. Like whatever made them had walked this ground today. I tried to call base camp on the radio. Nothing. The radio just made static. Complete equipment failure, except it wasn't failing. It was being jammed somehow. A ranger tried his backup radio. Same thing. Let's get out, I said. The decision wasn't hard. We didn't have a missing person anymore. We had a danger zone. We needed to evacuate and regroup. But something happened during that hike back to the landing zone. Ranger David Kirkwood, 32 years old, experienced climber, started climbing upward. Not toward the zone we were retreating from. Upward. Up the slope. When I called him, he didn't respond. He just kept climbing. I went after him. Bad decision maybe, but you don't leave people behind. He was standing at 9,500 feet, on a peak overlooking the Arrogech when I caught up. His face was white. Not from cold, from fear. There, he whispered, pointing. At first I saw nothing, then I saw it. It was on a ridge to the west, backlit by the last of the daylight. It was big, Impossibly big. 20 feet tall, maybe more. Covered in white fur or maybe ice, I couldn't tell. It was moving, actually moving, with this fluid, graceful motion that something that size shouldn't possess. Then it turned its head. Its head rotated. I don't mean it looked around. I mean its head spun in a complete circle. 360 degrees. Its neck twisting like nothing natural should twist. And I felt it looking at us, studying us. Kirkwood made a sound, not a word, just a sound of pure human terror. The thing stared at us for maybe 10 seconds. Then it turned and walked into a rock face. A solid rock face. And it disappeared into stone like the stone was water. We scrambled down the mountain. We didn't talk. We didn't stop. Kirkwood was hyperventilating, making these choking sounds. I focused on moving, on getting us off that peak before dark, on getting us somewhere safe. There was nowhere safe. By the time we reached the landing zone, the sun had dropped below the horizon. The darkness was total. Our helicopter couldn't fly in conditions like this. We were stuck. That night, huddled in the camp, the humming sound never stopped. It just kept going, low frequency, constant. It got inside your head and made you think things you shouldn't think. I didn't sleep. None of us did. The next morning, we found Eric Bradford. We found him 3 miles from camp, in a ravine hidden by an overhang. His body was positioned in a specific way. His arms were spread. His legs were arranged. It looked intentional, like someone had arranged him after death, like it was a message. When I looked at the body carefully, I noticed the other 2 bodies, Patricia and Harold. They were positioned the same way, like they were arranged to create some kind of pattern. I marked it on a map, comparing the positions. When I looked at it from above, the pattern made geometric shapes, like something that could only be appreciated from high in the sky, like something was sending a message to the clouds. "We need to leave," the team leader said. His name was Captain Morgan, National Guard. He'd come to help with rescue operations. "This isn't safe. This isn't right." He was right, but I had to understand. If I didn't understand this, it would happen again and again. "Give me 1 more day," I said. We took tissue samples from Patricia's body. The cells looked wrong under the magnifying glass. They had a crystalline structure, like they were frozen at the cellular level, like ice had incorporated itself into her actual cells. The samples were sent to the university for analysis. They disappeared somewhere between the park and the lab, never arrived. That's when I knew something bigger than murder was happening. The government showed up on the 3rd day. CIA types, NSA types, men in dark suits who had no business being in the Arctic. They took all the documentation, all the photos, all the samples, and they told me to keep my mouth shut. "This is a matter of national security," they said. Like that explained anything. But the thing was, they weren't surprised. They knew about this. They had files about this. Historical files. Cases dating back decades. The Arigech region specifically. Other Arctic locations. A pattern of deaths. A pattern of disappearances. And every death followed the same pattern. A week after they left, I went back to the mountains alone. That was probably the dumbest thing I've ever done. And I've survived avalanches and bear attacks. But I was obsessed. I needed to understand. I needed to know what was hunting in my park. I climbed up to Ermine Hill alone. I brought explosives, mountaineer equipment for avalanche control. I brought my rifle. I brought a flare gun. I brought everything I could think of that might help. The air got colder as I climbed. The landscape started looking wrong. The peaks were in different places than they should be. A valley I'd hiked through 100 times suddenly seemed to have moved. Spatial perception became unreliable. Landmarks appeared in multiple locations. And then I saw it. Not from a distance this time. Up close. It was maybe 22 feet tall. Its body was composed of ice and snow and something else. Something organic. Like the ice had incorporated flesh into itself, or flesh had become ice. It was standing on a ridge, and its proportions were just slightly off from human. Just slightly wrong enough that your brain registered it as not human. "Hello, Theodore Prescott," it said. It spoke inside my head, not sound waves, telepathy. Pure communication straight into my consciousness, and it spoke in English. perfect English, with an accent I couldn't place. "I've been watching you," it continued. "You're the one in charge here. You're the one responsible. I appreciate organization, structure. You would be useful to me." "What are you?" I asked. I don't know why I was trying to communicate with it, trying to negotiate with it. Maybe that's just what humans do when facing something impossible. "I am what remains," it said. "I've existed in Arctic regions for thousands of years, before your kind understood fire, before your kind built anything. I was here, waiting, learning. You killed those researchers. Yes, they were necessary. Their minds gave me information. Human consciousness is complex, beautiful. I need to understand it completely, before the integration begins." Integration. "My kind will soon establish contact with yours. We need to understand you completely. So when we arrive, there will be no fear, no resistance, just acceptance." It stepped toward me. The ground cracked beneath its feet. "Join me, Theodore. Help me understand, or I kill everyone in this park, one by one, until you agree." I ran. I don't mean I walked away quickly. I mean I ran like my life depended on it, because it did. I ran down the mountain, through passes, scrambling over ice and stone. The thing didn't chase me. It didn't have to. It was patient. It was already winning. I reached the spot where I'd cached the explosives, mountaineer charges used for avalanche control. I set them up in the narrow pass, the only way down from Ermine Hill. Multiple charges, all timed for simultaneous detonation. I knew something about that thing from our communication. When it was focused on talking to me, when it was concentrating on telepathy, it was vulnerable. It couldn't move as fast. It couldn't shift between solid and ethereal states. It had to maintain physical form. So I triggered the first charge. The explosion echoed across the peaks. The sound was massive. The ground shook. Snow avalanched down from above. And in that moment of chaos, when the thing's attention was fractured by the noise and the pressure, I detonated the flare gun. The flare ignited directly above the pass. Brilliant white light, burning hot. And something about it, maybe the electromagnetic energy, maybe the intense heat disrupting whatever properties kept it anchored to reality. The thing screamed. That sound. I'll never forget that sound. Not a human scream. Not an animal scream. Something that existed in frequencies your ear shouldn't be able to process but did anyway. I triggered the second explosion. The avalanche came down like the mountain was trying to bury everything. Snow, ice, stone, all of it tumbling down in a massive wave. The thing was caught in it, buried, incapacitated. I didn't wait to see if it was dead. I didn't wait to verify. I just ran. The descent took 5 hours in conditions that should have taken 8. I was moving on pure adrenaline and fear. Behind me, I could feel it. Even buried, even crushed under thousands of tons of snow. I could feel its consciousness reaching out for me. I made it to base camp half dead. Massive lacerations on my arms and legs from climbing rocks. Frostbite on my fingers and toes. Bleeding internally from something that had grabbed me during the avalanche. I was in shock and barely conscious. But I made it. The helicopter evacuation took 2 hours. I spent 3 months in hospital recovering. When I got out, I was transferred to Anchorage. Desk job. Administrative work. They said I was emotionally unfit for field work. That I'd suffered trauma. But I knew the truth. They wanted me away from the park. Away from what was still there. The official story was that the 3 researchers died in a climbing accident. Bad planning, bad luck, weather, human error. Simple as that. Nothing mysterious, nothing strange. The park was closed for environmental monitoring. Military observation posts were installed throughout the region, ostensibly for surveying wildlife, actually for watching, waiting. I wrote a classified report that I know ended up in government files. A report that I was told would never be seen by civilian eyes. A report that documented everything. In that report, I concluded this. The entity is patient. It doesn't need to leave the Arctic. It can wait. It's learning by incremental contact. Each death provides neurological data. Each interaction teaches it more about human behavior, human psychology, human communication. In another decade, it will be indistinguishable from human. Its body will have fully integrated biological human cells. Its consciousness will have processed enough human experience that it will understand our culture completely. And then it will walk out of the Arctic, and it will walk into our cities. And we will welcome it, because we won't recognize it as the thing that hunted my rangers in the dark. I'm 67 years old now. I left Alaska 10 years ago. I live in Anchorage. I keep to myself. Sometimes I see news reports about Arctic research, new expeditions, new scientists going to study the Aragech. They never come back. The official reports always say the same thing: accidents, weather, bad luck. But I know better. I know what's still out there, still learning, still waiting, and I know it's running out of patience. My name is Maxwell Childers, and I'm going to tell you what happened in the Chilkat Valley in November 1984. I'm 68 years old now, which means I've kept this story quiet for nearly 40 years. The government made me sign papers saying I couldn't talk about it, but I'm dying, and some things are too big to carry to the grave. I've worked as a wilderness ranger for 17 years when this started. My job was simple: protect the wildlife in the Chilkat Bald Eagle Preserve near Haines, Alaska, and manage the area for research and safety. I knew those mountains and forests better than I knew people. That was by choice. I grew up in Juneau. My mother was Tlingit, but I never really connected with the community. Too many stories about spirits and shapeshifters and things that wore different skins. My father was a biologist, and he taught me that nature had better explanations than superstition. Evolutionary adaptations, behavioral patterns, nothing magical about it. I inherited his skepticism and his respect for facts. The Chilkat Valley in November is one of the most beautiful places on Earth. The river runs glacier blue through old-growth forest, massive spruce and hemlock trees that have stood for centuries. In autumn, when the salmon run is ending, thousands of bald eagles gather here. It's the largest concentration of eagles anywhere in the world. You can see them perched in the tall trees, dark shapes against the gray sky. Their white heads catch the light. November also means darkness is coming fast. We were getting about 8 hours of daylight. The weather turned cold, temperatures dropping into the 20s at night. Storms rolled in from the ocean, bringing rain and wind that could gust over 40 miles an hour. The river started to freeze at the edges. It was isolated country. Haines, the nearest town, was 12 miles away by rough mountain trail or by boat if the water was calm enough. In winter, you could get trapped for days if a storm hit. I lived alone at the ranger station, a small wooden building with a radio, supplies, and not much else. That was how I liked it. Just me, the mountains, and the animals that actually followed the rules of nature. The valley had history, though I didn't think much about it then. An old naturalist named John Muir had visited in 1889 and written about seeing an impossible number of eagle-like creatures in the valley. His journal described something that bothered him. He said some of the birds didn't move quite right. He wrote that they seemed to be things pretending to be eagles. After that trip, Muir apparently had some kind of breakdown. He spent time in an asylum. I figured he'd just seen a lot of eagles, and his mind played tricks on him. Growing up, I'd heard my mother's people talk about the Chilkat Watchers, spirits in the old stories that could wear the shape of eagles. They were hunting creatures. They were something else wearing animal skin. But that's all it was. Old stories. Superstition. Fear of nature because people didn't understand it. I didn't believe in any of that. I believed in what I could observe and measure. That was my first mistake. The unease started small. In early November, I noticed the eagles were different. Not in any way I could write a report about. Just different. They seemed more alert, more aggressive toward each other. Their vocalizations, the sounds they made, included things I'd never documented in 17 years of observation. Complex calls that almost sounded like they were trying to form words. I told myself it was the changing season. Birds react to pressure systems and temperature shifts. There was a reason for everything. I should have listened to the part of me that knew better. 3 people came to the valley on November 11th to study the eagle migration patterns. Daniel Morrison was a wildlife photographer. Well known, published in National Geographic. Kevin Pierce was his assistant, a young guy in his 20s who wanted to learn the profession. Jennifer Okonkwo was an ornithologist, which means she studied birds scientifically. Smart woman. Had her PhD from Berkeley. They set up a base camp in the Central Valley, near where the river made a wide bend. Equipped with portable radios, good tents, plenty of supplies. Jennifer had a specific mission: document the behavioral changes in the eagle population during the late migration period. She wanted to know if the birds were reacting to climate shifts or environmental factors. I should have told them to wait, to come back in spring. I should have said something about the strangeness in the valley. But what would I have told them? That the eagles seemed wrong? That I had a feeling? The protocol was simple. Each team member checked in every hour by radio. Jennifer was monitoring the radio at base camp. Daniel and Kevin would move to different observation points, and Jennifer would rotate out to photograph and observe herself. Everything went fine for 2 days. On November 13th, around 3:45 in the afternoon, Jennifer radioed me at the ranger station. Her voice sounded different, tight, careful. "Max, this is Okonkwo at base camp. We're seeing some unusual behavior in the eagles, really unusual. I'm going to investigate more closely. Back in 2 hours." I told her to be careful. She said she would be. Then nothing. When she didn't check in at 5:45, I drove my truck as close as I could get to base camp and walked the rest of the way. The tents were intact, the equipment was organized and ready. Coffee was still warm in a pot by their cooking area, but no people. That's when I realized something was actually wrong. I radioed down to Haines and called for a search team. The nearest state police could arrive by morning. I spent the night at their camp, trying not to think about where 3 experienced outdoors people could have disappeared to in a 2-hour window. We found Daniel Morrison at dawn, about 4 miles from base camp, in a forest clearing beneath the tallest eagle roosts in the valley. I won't describe what we found in detail. I'm an old man, and some things I've worked hard to forget. But I'll tell you this. It wasn't an animal attack. Animals don't arrange bodies carefully. Animals don't position prey with precision. Daniel's body showed massive trauma, but it looked deliberate, surgical. His chest was opened from top to bottom. Internal organs were removed. Every drop of blood had been drained. Kevin we found in the river 3 miles downstream. He was drowned, but like Daniel, he'd been worked on. His eyes were gone, not torn out, but removed cleanly. His skull had multiple puncture wounds, precise and careful, like someone had used a sharp tool. Jennifer we never found. Her radio location had pinged from a remote ridge area before stopping. We searched for weeks. All we found was a massive nest made of branches and bones and hair. Not sticks, like a normal eagle nest, but structured from skeletal material. Human hair woven between the branches. Inside that nest were personal items from missing people going back decades. That's when I knew the valley had never been safe at all. The government showed up 2 days later. Not state police, not Forest Service investigators. Military personnel in unmarked uniforms. They arrived by helicopter with equipment and teams and absolute authority. They took everything: the bodies, the nest materials, samples from the area. They confiscated Jennifer's research notes. A man named Colonel Hayes told me to keep my mouth shut. He said it was a matter of national security. He said if I talked to anyone, I'd lose my pension and face charges I couldn't fight. He said the government would declare me mentally incompetent if I told anyone what we'd found. I believed him. They installed surveillance equipment throughout the valley. Cameras in trees. Sensors that monitored movement. By the end of the week, the Chilkat Valley had become a restricted military zone. No civilians allowed, no research, no observation. I was allowed to stay because I was already cleared and already knew everything. But I was watched constantly. They monitored my radio communications. They reviewed every report I filed. They were waiting to see what else would happen. 3 days into the lockdown, I found myself alone on a ridge, checking on one of the sensor stations. The sun was setting. The temperature was dropping fast. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was tired and grieving for people I'd just met, but who'd died because of this place. That's when I heard the sound. It was a vocalization I'd never heard before. Not quite a screech, not quite anything natural. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, echoing off the rock walls. And underneath the sound, I felt something. Pressure in my head. A presence watching from above. The eagle appeared out of the clouds like it had stepped down from the sky itself. I've seen thousands of eagles. This wasn't a real bird. It was massive. Wingspan easily over 12 feet. The body was too large, the proportions all wrong. The feathers seemed to move independently of the wing structure. And the eyes, they were wrong too. Bright yellow instead of the pale coloring real eagles have. Almost intelligent, almost aware, in a way that made my chest tight. It landed on a rock about 50 feet from me. Then it started to change. I'm trying to find words for something that breaks how you understand reality. The wings folded. The bones seemed to crack and rearrange beneath the feathers. Flesh restructured itself. It was like watching time-lapse photography of something rotting and rebuilding simultaneously. Except it was happening in seconds. The eagle became something between an eagle and a human, then more human than bird. Finally, it stood on two legs, nearly 9 feet tall, with a hybrid body. Parts still feathered, parts that looked like skin, a face that was both avian and something else. Something that was studying me with absolute intelligence. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. When it spoke, the sound didn't come through the air. It formed directly in my mind, like a voice that came from inside my own skull. Max Childers, we've been watching you. 17 years in this valley. 17 years of blood we did not take. 17 years of respect for the forest you did not understand. I managed to ask what it was. We are older than your species comprehends. We were here before your forests grew. We survived by learning new forms. The eagle shape was useful for a time. We hunted in that form, learned what hunting could be. We learned your languages by monitoring your camps. We learned your weaknesses by studying your bodies. Now we have learned enough. Now we will take your form and hunt from inside your cities, and humans will never know that we walk among them. I realized then that there were more of them, in the trees, on the rocks, watching from the sky. The valley wasn't full of eagles. It was full of these things wearing eagle shape. I ran. I made it back to the ranger station, locked the doors, called for an evacuation on the radio. They told me to wait. Military units were being moved. Protocols were being established. I was to remain in position and monitor entity movement. Entity, that's the word they used. Like it was a scientific term that made the impossible manageable. I realized something over the next 24 hours. The government knew. They didn't know what these things were exactly, but they knew about them. Knew they existed. Knew they were dangerous. They'd been monitoring the valley for longer than I realized. The 3 photographers weren't the first disappearances they knew about. They were just the first time the government could control the narrative. I pulled the archived records from our filing system, stuff I'd never read carefully. Missing hikers dating back decades. Researchers who disappeared. Tourists who were never found. All concentrated around the Chilkat Valley during certain times of year. The government had been tracking it all along. They came for me on November 16th. Military helicopters. A full extraction team. They said I was being reassigned. The valley was being placed under complete military control. An aerial spraying operation would begin to control the eagle population. I knew that wasn't what was happening. As the helicopter lifted off, I looked down at the valley. In the fading light, I could see the trees clearly. Thousands of birds, no, things, perched in the branches. All watching the sky, all still hunting. The spraying operation happened anyway, but it wasn't pesticide. I don't know what it was. Whatever they were trying to do, it didn't work. The creatures were still there, still thriving, still learning new shapes. I was medically discharged 2 weeks later. The military classified everything. My records were sealed. They offered me a settlement, significantly less than my full pension, and a legal agreement stating I would never discuss what happened. I took it. I was broken anyway. 40 years have passed. I've tried to live a normal life, moved to the lower 48, got a quiet job working at a nature center. Didn't talk about Alaska, didn't go back. But the valley never left me. I watched carefully over the decades. Investigated news reports, checked research publications, reached out to other rangers who'd been stationed there. What I found confirmed my worst fears. The creatures didn't stay in the valley, they spread. Or they were always there, just waiting for the valley to teach them enough to expand. I've documented sightings in crow form and raven form in urban centers. Birds showing problem-solving skills that exceed normal animal capability. Coordinated hunting behavior inconsistent with natural predation patterns. Birds that seem to study humans. Birds that gather on rooftops and power lines and watch. The last ranger I managed to contact, before the government shut down that line of communication, told me he'd seen them taking other forms. Not just birds. He thought he saw one in partial human shape, adjusting its disguise, preparing to walk among people undetected. I have nightmares about that. About the things wearing human faces. About being unable to tell the difference. About humanity not being able to tell the difference until it's too late. The government still has the valley locked down, still monitors it, still runs aerial operations I don't understand. They've classified everything as a biological research facility, military access only. But sometimes I read environmental reports about the eagle population in southeast Alaska. The numbers keep growing, the behavior keeps changing. Scientists write confused papers about unprecedented cognitive abilities in raptors. Avian neurologists are baffled by structural anomalies. They're all dancing around the same conclusion I reached 40 years ago. We're not alone in this valley, and we're not alone anymore anywhere else either. They're spreading, learning, adapting, and by the time we recognize them for what they are, they'll already be indistinguishable from us. I wanted to warn people. I'm telling you this now, believe it or don't. But if you ever go to southeast Alaska, if you find yourself in the Chilkat Valley, pay attention to the eagles. Watch how they move. Listen to how they sound. And if an eagle ever looks at you the way a person would look, with recognition and intelligence and hunger, you run. You don't look back, you run. Because they're learning, and they're patient. And they've been hunting humans since 1889. My name is Harrison Threlfall. Most people call me Harry. I'm 55 years old, and I've spent the last 20 years working as a ranger in the biggest national park in Alaska, Wrangell St. Elias. 13 million acres of ice, rock, and silence. I've pulled hikers out of crevasses. I've carried dead climbers off mountains. I've sat with men while they died because the helicopter couldn't fly through the storm. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in monsters. I believe in cold, gravity, and bad decisions. That's what kills people out here. Not curses, not spirits, physics. At least, that's what I believed before August of 1989. Before I went into the cave. I need to tell you what happened. Not because anyone will believe me. No one did. The government made sure of that. But I'm getting old, and the thing I saw down there is not getting old. It's waiting. And someone needs to know. Let me start from the beginning. I was Deputy Chief Ranger, Search and Rescue. That's a fancy title that means I was the one they sent when things went wrong in places no one should be. I was good at it, maybe too good. Being good at saving strangers made it easy to ignore the fact that I was terrible at everything else. My wife died while I was on a rescue call. My kids stopped talking to me years ago. I drank too much, but never on the job. The mountains were the only place I made sense. August in Alaska is strange. You get maybe 11 hours of daylight, which sounds like a lot, until you remember that 6 months earlier, you had almost none. The valleys sit around 40, 50 degrees. Up high on the glaciers, it drops below zero fast. Weather changes in minutes. Clear sky, then whiteout. Calm air, then wind that knocks you flat. You learn to read the signs, or you die. The Nebesna Glacier area was a place I knew well but never liked. It's one of the longest glaciers in North America, and it feeds into a ridge system called Tanada. The ice there is old, really old, and underneath it there are caves. Miles of them, going deep into the mountain, most of them never mapped. We kept people out of the deeper sections, always had. There were reasons for that, even before I knew the real ones. In 1923, a mining crew went into those caves. 5 men. They found 2 of them 6 months later. What was left of them? The report said something about evidence of predation by a large animal, but no animal was ever identified. In 1956, a survey team mapped part of the cave system and came back shaken. They wrote about non-geological formations in their report. Structures in the ice that looked like they'd been carved. On purpose. In 1971, the Park Service closed the whole area. No explanation given to the public. I asked about it once when I first started. My supervisor looked at me like I'd asked about his divorce and said, "We don't go there, Harry. That's all you need to know." I listened to that advice for 20 years. Then the scientists disappeared. The call came on a Tuesday. 3 researchers, a glaciologist named Dr. Robert Feldstein, a geologist named Dr. Margaret Avery, and a grad student named Paul Thanos, had gone into the Nebezna ice caves to collect ice core samples. Climate research. They had 2 weeks of supplies, satellite communication gear, and all the right equipment. Smart, experienced people doing careful work. Their first check-in was normal. Weather good, making progress, setting up camp inside the cave entrance. Standard stuff. The second check-in was not normal. Feldstein's voice on the satellite phone sounded excited, but also confused. He said they'd found formations in the cave that looked man-made. Tool marks in the ice. Shapes that looked like they'd been carved by hands. He said it was impossible. No one had ever lived this deep in the glacier, but there it was. They were going to investigate further. Then came the last message, Margaret's voice this time, and she was scared. She said the temperature inside the cave had jumped from below 0 to 80 degrees in seconds. Their equipment was failing. Something was wrong with the air. They were going to find the heat source. After that, nothing. No more calls. No emergency beacon. Just silence. I put together a 4-man rescue team. We flew to the glacier by helicopter and hiked to their base camp. It took us 6 hours. When we got there, everything looked fine. Tents still standing. Supplies untouched. Satellite phones sitting on a rock, fully charged. Like they'd just stepped out for a walk and never came back. We entered the cave the next morning. The entrance was wide, maybe 30 feet across, 15 high. Blue ice walls that glowed when you hit them with a flashlight. Beautiful, in the way that dangerous things often are. We moved carefully, roped together, calling out their names. We found Feldstein first. He was about 200 yards inside the entrance, lying face down on the ice. At first I thought he'd slipped and fallen. Then I got close. His head was missing. Not torn off, not crushed, cut, clean, like someone had used a blade, but not any blade I'd ever seen. The cut was too smooth, too perfect, like slicing through butter with a hot wire. The worst part was his body. From the outside, he looked frozen solid, covered in frost. Normal for a body in a glacier cave. But when the medic checked him, he pulled his hand back like he'd been burned. Feldstein's insides were cooked. His organs were charred black, like someone had put a blowtorch to his guts but left his skin cold. I've seen a lot of dead people. I've seen people torn apart by falls, frozen stiff, drowned in glacial meltwater. I have never seen anything like Robert Feldstein. We found Margaret 2 miles deeper. She was 30 feet up, stuck in the ice wall. Not on a ledge, not in a crack. Inside the ice itself, like the wall had opened up, swallowed her, and frozen shut again. Her arms were spread wide, her mouth was open. Every organ inside her body had burst, like something had pumped her full of air until she popped. There was no way she got up there on her own. No climbing gear in the area. No marks on the ice below her. It was as if something had picked her up and pressed her into the wall like a thumb pushing into clay. We never found Paul Thanos. His locator beacon was pinging from somewhere deep in the cave system. Deeper than any map said the caves went. Deeper than anyone had ever gone. I should have turned around right then. I should have called it in and waited for the feds. But I didn't. Because I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The bodies weren't just placed randomly. They were pointing. Feldstein's arm was stretched toward the deeper cave. Margaret's open mouth faced the same direction. Like arrows. Like signs. Something wanted us to follow. I sent 2 of my rangers back to base camp with orders to radio for federal support. I kept one, Dave Kessler, my best man, and we went deeper. I can't explain why. Part of it was Paul. He was 24 years old. If there was any chance he was alive down there, I had to try. But part of it was something else. Something I didn't want to admit then, and barely want to admit now. I wanted to go deeper. I felt pulled. The cave changed as we went further in. The walls got smoother. The ice got darker. And the darkness itself got wrong. I don't know how else to say it. When you shine a flashlight in a normal cave, the beam cuts through the dark and hits the far wall. In this cave, the light went out about 20 feet and just stopped. Like the darkness was eating it. Like the dark was a thing, solid and heavy, and our little flashlights were trying to push through mud. Dave noticed it too. "Harry," he said, "why does it feel like the dark is pushing back?" I told him to shut up and keep walking. The temperature was insane. 1 minute it was 5 below zero, cold enough to make your teeth ache. The next it would spike to 40 above, and we'd be sweating under our gear. No pattern, no wind bringing warm air from somewhere. It just changed. Like the cave was breathing, and we were inside its lungs. Then we heard the singing. It came from below us. Not ahead, not behind, below. Through the ice under our feet. A sound like voices, but not human voices. Harmonics that don't exist in nature. Frequencies that made my fillings hum and my eyes water. Beautiful and terrible at the same time, like hearing something you were never supposed to hear. Dave grabbed my arm. "We need to go back," he said. He was right. I knew he was right. But my legs kept walking forward. That's when the time went wrong. We'd been in the cave for what felt like maybe 30 minutes past where we found Margaret. When I checked my watch, 3 hours had passed. Dave's watch said the same thing. But neither of us had eaten. Neither of us was tired. It was like 3 hours of our lives had been scooped out clean. We found things in the ice. Bones. Old ones. So old the ice around them had turned cloudy and yellow. Some of the bones were human, some were not. The not human ones were big, really big, and shaped wrong. Too many joints in the fingers. Rib cages that curved the wrong way. Skulls with no eye sockets. Mixed in with the bones were objects. A knife made of copper, green with age. A gold ring with markings I didn't recognize. A wooden tool so old it was nearly stone. These things came from different times, different centuries. People had been dying in this cave for a very, very long time. Then we found the wall. Not a cave wall. A flat surface, floor to ceiling, smooth as glass. And carved into it were marks. Hundreds of them. Rows and rows of small, careful scratches, grouped in patterns. Dave stared at it and said, "That's a calendar." He was right. It was a record. Something had been counting. Counting time. Counting victims. The marks went back further than I could see, disappearing into the dark on both sides. Some of the groupings were spaced about 40 marks apart. Every 40 years, a cluster of new scratches. A feeding cycle. And the most recent cluster was fresh. The ice around it was still clear. Whatever made those marks had been here recently. I heard Dave's breathing change behind me, fast, panicked. "Harry," he whispered, "something's here, right now. I can feel it." I felt it too, a presence. Not a sound, not a sight, a weight. Like the air had gotten heavier. Like the mountain itself had leaned in close to watch us. The darkness around our flashlight beams seemed to thicken. And from somewhere deep below, the singing got louder. Dave broke. He turned and ran. I don't blame him. Every cell in my body was screaming at me to do the same. But I didn't run. Because in the beam of my flashlight, I saw something in the ice ahead of me. A face. Paul Thanos' face, frozen behind a sheet of clear ice. His mouth open in a scream that would never end. His eyes were gone. Just empty holes where eyes should be. And his body was arranged just like the others, pointing deeper. I should have run. I went deeper. The cave opened up. I stepped out of the narrow tunnel and into a space so big my flashlight couldn't find the ceiling. The air was warm. Too warm, like a room with a furnace running. The singing was everywhere now, surrounding me, filling my chest with vibrations that made it hard to breathe. The ice walls glowed with a faint light of their own. A sick blue-green, like light at the bottom of a deep pool. And then it came out of the wall. Not through a crack, not through a hole. Through the solid rock, like the stone was water, and it was swimming. It pushed through the wall the way you'd push through a curtain, and the rock rippled around it and went solid again behind it. It was tall, 14 feet, maybe more. Shaped like a person, but wrong in every way that mattered. Its skin was see-through, like ice, and I could see things moving inside it. Crystal structures, veins of light. Its arms were too long, and the joints bent in places where there shouldn't be joints. It had no eyes, just smooth, flat space where a face should be. But I could feel it looking at me. I could feel it looking through me. I raised my rifle. My hands were shaking so bad, I could barely hold it. It spoke to me, not with sound. The words just appeared in my head, clear as a bell, calm as a Sunday morning. You came down seeking answers. We come down seeking food. This mountain is our home. You are our guests, and guests feed the host. I tried to speak, my voice cracked like a teenager's. What are you? Old, older than the ice, older than the people who walked this land before your people. We were here when there was nothing but rock and heat. We will be here when the ice melts and the rock crumbles. The scientists, the miners, all those people. Food. Your kind comes to us. You always come. Your minds are bright and sweet, full of memories and knowledge. Each one we consume adds to what we know. We have eaten thousands of your kind across the long years. We know your languages, your fears, your wars, your loves. All of it lives inside us now. The thing moved closer. It didn't walk. It glided, like the ground was ice and it was skating. The singing grew louder, and I realized it was coming from the creature itself. The sound was part of it. You are interesting, Harrison Threlfall. You have much pain, much guilt. Your dead wife, your lost children. We can taste it from here. It is sweet. I felt something then, a pull, like hooks in my brain, gently tugging me forward. My feet started to move on their own. One step, two, toward the thing. I wanted to go to it. I wanted to let it take me. The guilt, the loneliness, the drinking. I was so tired of carrying all of it. And this thing was offering to take it away. All I had to do was walk forward. I thought about my son, David. 7 years old the last time I saw him smile at me. He'd been holding a fish he caught in a creek near our house, and he looked up at me like I was the greatest man in the world. I stopped walking. No, I said. The creature tilted its head. That smooth, eyeless face pointed at me like a dog hearing a strange noise. They all say no at first. I pulled the flare from my belt and lit it. The thing hissed, not a sound, a feeling, a spike of rage inside my skull. The red light from the flare made the ice walls bleed color. The creature pulled back, just a step. It didn't like the light. Or maybe it didn't like the heat. I backed up into the tunnel I'd come through. It was narrow, barely wide enough for me. Way too narrow for that thing. But then it started to push through the walls again. It didn't need the tunnel. It could move through solid rock. The walls beside me rippled and bulged. It was coming through. I had 4 sticks of dynamite in my pack. Standard mountain rescue equipment for avalanche work. I'd never once used them for anything but snow. I jammed 2 sticks into a crack in the ceiling and lit the fuse. Then I ran. The explosion was enormous. The sound alone nearly knocked me out. Ice and rock came down like rain, and the tunnel behind me collapsed in a roar of breaking stone. I kept running. The ground shook. The walls cracked. I could hear the creature screaming. Not in my ears, in my mind. A sound like 1,000 voices howling at once. I lit the other 2 sticks and threw them behind me without looking. Another explosion. Another collapse. The cave was coming down, section by section, and I was barely staying ahead of it. The thing was hurt. I could feel it. When the cave collapsed on it, when it was halfway between solid and not solid, the rock caught it, pinned it. It was trapped between states, stuck in the stone like a fly in amber. But it wasn't dead. I felt its last message hit my brain like a punch. We have been here for 1,000,000 years. Rock does not hold us. Ice does not hold us. We will get out, and when we do, we will know everything your kind knows, because we have eaten your memories for 10,000 years. When we walk among you, you will not know us from your own. I crawled out of the cave mouth into daylight, coughing blood, 3 ribs broken, my skin blue with cold. Dave was there with the rescue team. They dragged me onto the helicopter. I passed out before we left the ground. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, hypothermia, frostbite on 6 fingers. They saved all of them. The doctors called me lucky. I wasn't lucky. I was left alive on purpose. The FBI showed up on day 4. Men in dark suits who didn't smile. They took my statement, all 12 hours of it. They recorded everything. Then they told me none of it ever happened. The official story: 3 scientists killed in a cave collapse caused by unstable ice. Human error. Tragic accident. Case closed. They sealed the cave with explosives. Brought the whole entrance down. They built a monitoring station nearby, disguised as a weather research post. I saw the equipment manifests before they were classified. Seismic sensors, thermal cameras, motion detectors. All of it pointed at a cave that was supposed to be empty. They fired me 2 months later. Medical discharge. Unreliable due to trauma. 20 years of service, and they threw me out like a broken tool. They gave me a pension and a warning. Talk about what happened, and the pension goes away. I took the deal. Not because I was scared of losing the money. Because I was scared that no one would believe me, and then the thing in that mountain would have one less person in the world who knew the truth. That was 37 years ago. I'm an old man now. I live in a cabin outside Anchorage. I still don't sleep well. Some nights I hear the singing, faint, far away, like it's coming up through the ground beneath my floor. Maybe it's just memory, maybe it's not. Here's what I know. That thing is alive down there. The monitoring station still runs. I have a friend, I won't say who still works in the agency that watches it. He told me they pick up movement every few years. Vibrations, heat signatures, something shifting in the deep rock. The cave they sealed won't hold forever. Ice melts, rock cracks. 100 years, 1,000. That thing is patient. It's been patient for longer than the human race has existed. And it's been eating us for centuries. Every person it takes, it absorbs. Their thoughts, their memories, their knowledge. By now, it knows more about us than we know about ourselves. Our languages, our technology, our weaknesses. When it finally gets out, and it will get out, it won't come stumbling into the light like some dumb animal. It will know exactly how to look like us, how to talk like us, how to live among us. And we will never see it coming. I'm telling you this because someone has to know. Tape it. Write it down. Remember it. Because one day, a long time from now, someone is going to walk into a town somewhere in Alaska, and everyone will think they're just a new neighbor. Quiet, friendly, a little odd maybe. And behind that face, behind those borrowed eyes, something ancient and hungry will be smiling. Because it finally found its way out of the mountain. And there will be no cave deep enough for the rest of us to hide in. From the classified deposition of Harry Threlfall, former Deputy Chief Ranger, Wrangell St. Elias National Park and Preserve. Filed and sealed, 1989. Document clearance level, restricted. Status, never to be released.